Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and before free agency kicks off tomorrow, I wanted to put out a video discussing some of the players I would be looking to target this year. We're going to go over quite a few. I've also got them added to a breakdown of the salary cap so you can have an idea of what the contracts would look like, what the spending would be for the team. We'll go through that all at the very end. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. And excuse me if I cough a lot during this video or kind of sound off. A little sick right now. Unfortunately, it's been a rough year for sickness. I've been kind of dealing with this for a while. So hopefully it comes to an end soon. But it's free agency week. We got a lot of stuff to do, so that's not going to change anything. Now, we'll go position by position here. Starting with quarterbacks, I don't really have a big name I would go after. I mean, you're definitely not looking in this range. But the Jaguars do need a backup. I think right now I would almost just be comfortable letting CJ Beathard come back to the team, but it's not really a position I'd be super concerned with. And I think the draft would also provide you some opportunities to maybe get a long-term backup in here for an affordable cost. This class was full of developmental prospects with legit upside entering the NFL. And some of them are going to fall. Someone's going to be available on day 3. That is probably the approach I would take to the quarterback position rather than going after a backup. We mentioned Kyle Trask on here, I think, in our last video about potential free agents that could come in. I don't have a big problem with it. I think that you could do better. I think you could invest some late draft capital in the position and get someone who could at least be a solid backup for the duration of their rookie contract. So kind of my take there. This isn't a position I would look super close at right now for free agency. Running back is another one. I would not make a move here. I think this is a really strong draft class at the position. I've got my names I would be looking at very close as well. If you follow this channel, you know the top one for me is probably Kyle Monangai. I think that would be a phenomenal fit in Jacksonville. I think he'd bring some juice to this offense in terms of the short area explosiveness primarily. He's a tough runner. He's going to hit people hard, and that's going to get your offense rolling. And it's going to get people fired up. So I'd like to go that approach. So yet another position that I'm probably not looking too close at addressing in free agency. If you did want to bring in someone, I think it would really only make sense if maybe you moved on from ETN right now. Maybe you would go after, who's the guy? J.K. Dobbins, like that kind of player, if you want to get a cheap deal. But even that said, I think you can get someone in the draft that wouldn't be too focused on this position for free agency. Now, wide receiver. Don't have our guy listed here. There's 2 players that make a lot of sense. I wish T. Higgins was available. If he was, he would be my guy. I know it would cost a lot of money. Totally get that. It would not stop me because while I'm usually against spending big money in free agency, there are some exceptions. There are some players that make sense. And pairing T. Higgins with Trevor Lawrence again, with Brian Thomas Jr. in this offense, that makes too much sense, right? That's a move that you make, even if it costs you a lot of money, because I would argue he has more value to your team than he does to the other contenders out there for getting his services. Of course, T. Higgins was franchise tagged. He is not out there on the trade block right now, and so you can't really plan for that, and he's probably not going to be in Jacksonville for that reason. Now, the 2 names that make a lot of sense. One is not on here. I'm going to talk about him in a second, but the first one's Chris Godwin. Now, there's a lot of talk about his contract getting crazy. There's talk that it could go up to like $28 million. I think that is insanity, just given that, as much as Chris Godwin has been effective and consistent throughout his career outside of, injury last year, I guess, he is a guy who has been usually like 1,100 yards a season. I don't think you pay that position nearly $30 million, especially given that he's played most of those seasons. This isn't something where he's putting up 1,100 yards and he missed like 3 or 4 games in a year. So Chris Godwin, I think he makes a lot of sense for Jacksonville. I think that if the price was to stay closer to this and you stay under 25 or at 25, I think that's a good deal. Because you look at this last year for Chris Godwin. We'll take a look at this really quick. In his production in a limited amount of games, I believe he played 7 games with Tampa Bay. And this was with Liam Cohen playing in the slot. And the thing with Godwin as well, it's not just a really good receiver, he's also a great blocker. So he's going to bring a lot in that regard, going to be a great fit for that reason. But you see 576 yards in 7 games. When we do the math on this, and you say that he's healthy for an entire season, if he stays that way, which you look back, all these years, it's a lot of targets, right? He's played a lot of snaps for the Buccaneers. If he were to stay healthy all year, and he fits in this system the same way he did in Tampa, has the same production, you could get in someone who could arguably get close to 1,400 yards, because that's what he was on pace for this year. 5 touchdowns in 7 games as well. He was going to shatter his record for a season. I mean, just absolutely shatter it. Now, 2019, I guess, he had a great year then, so I guess he would be close to that. But still, he'd have more touchdowns, he'd have more yards. He was on track for an incredible year. So Chris Godwin, he would make a lot of sense as the big-time acquisition. I wouldn't really be against that. I just don't want it to get to, like, above $25 million and get crazy. And I honestly prefer the upside and the cost that you would get with the guy that I am going to advocate for here. He's not listed on here, but we'll just look him up on PFF. That is Cooper Kupp. It sounds like it's going to come down to one of these two players. They both make a ton of sense. But Cooper, he's going to give you a really good blocker. He's still a good receiver. The problem, obviously, has been injuries, right? He was out for, 5 weeks here this last year. Puka also started to really take over the offense, and there were games where Cooper just was not getting targeted as much, and you saw his production kind of go down at the end of the year. I could see that changing under Liam Cohen, but ultimately, I still think you're getting a guy who can get around 1,000 yards receiving, maybe more, if he is healthy all season. That is the big question, but you're going to get someone who's also going to make an impact as a blocker, and you're getting a player who's going to be a lot more affordable. So while you're talking about Chris Godwin here, who could get up around $25 million, that's probably the fair price to set right now as far as what he'll go for, and it'll be something. We don't know. It's just my guess right now. Cooper Kupp, and the way his contract is, he right now is slated to earn $20 million this year, but the Rams are on what's the saying I would say here? I'll say they're responsible for $5 million of that right now, and they'll be responsible for another $2.5 million if they keep him past, I think, like 5 days into the new year. So with Cooper Kupp, you can negotiate a trade, send a very late pick to them right now. You could probably get them to take on the $7.5 million, and you could land him in Jacksonville, and now you're paying him half of what you'd be paying Chris Godwin. Right? So that's not a bad situation for the team. Now, is Chris Godwin probably going to be the more effective receiver? Yes. You're also paying him double. So Cooper Kupp is the direction I would want to go here to bring in this type of receiver. Still someone who, the yardage is crazy. 2021, such a ridiculous year. And you're not going to, get that again. I'm going to say that's obviously not the expectation that he's going to come in here. He's going to go to the playoffs, and you're going to get 2,400 yards over that, which this includes playoffs. That's why the number is so insane. But you are going to get someone who's going to come in, have a really good baseline, fit into the system, know what to do, and be a nice presence in the slot, and help get your run game going. So, does that have value to me? Yes. And you get him cheaper than Christian Kirk. And I think you would also have a player who probably is a little bit better than Christian Kirk. But obviously it probably comes down to, who gets injured, who plays more games, and that sort of thing. Now, the tight end position, would I make any moves there? I don't know there's anyone I'm, big on as far as signing, because so many of these guys are more of receiving options. Some of them are also signed, like Zach Ertz got signed, I think, yesterday. Austin Hooper could be a name you look at. He had a kind of sneaky good season with the Patriots. He's also a very good blocker, someone who can do everything all around. If you want to bring in another player alongside Brennan Strange, he would be a good option. But this is also a really deep tight end class, and I think you can get someone probably on day 3 that could have a legit impact. So I would not go with a tight end in free agency, but I think if you did, he would probably be the obvious guy if you want to get someone who isn't just like a close to veteran minimum type of contract. Now, offensive line. One person I would target, I don't know if he's on this list. We'll see if he is. He should be. Although it does not look like he is. Cornelius Lucas is a name I would bring in. Now, we'll take a look at him and his career. He is the tackle for the Washington Commanders. Played part of the year this last year. Hasn't really been a starter throughout his career. But when you watch the film and then you also look at the grading, throughout his entire career, very good pass protector. Very few issues there. Right? He's played now for 11 seasons. So he's been around the NFL for quite a while. As a run blocker, especially gotten better in recent years, but I think this is a really good option for a guy you can bring in and have be the backup at tackle. You've also had injuries with Walker Little throughout his career that has hurt. I think you'd want to be ready to have someone able to go. If he goes down, Javon Foster could be that option, but for what Cornelius Lucas could cost, which I think would come in around maybe $3.5 to $4 million, this is a really good deal, right? You're getting a guy who can come in, start for you, play well, you can rely on him, and you're not paying him that much to do it. So that's the kind of contract that I'd like to bring in, and I'd like to make sure that tackle is solidified. I'm not sure how many other players I would like out of this class at tackle, but Cornelius Lucas is one that I've personally been a fan of since probably halfway through last year, if I'm being honest. Now, at the guard position, Trey Smith is obviously not an option anymore. He has been franchise tagged by the Chiefs, probably going to get extended there, especially after Joe Thuney got traded. So he's not going to be an option as much as he would have fit what you wanted to do. You've got some players who make sense here. Tevin Jenkins could be one. He's had a very good career outside of injuries. That is the primary issue with him. So if you got a healthy version of him, probably worth it. But he's had a lot of injuries. You see that with the snap count, right? Never got over 750 snaps in a season. So that is the concern there. The guy who makes the most sense for Jacksonville in my mind is Kevin Zeitler. Now, he's not like a super fast guy. He's a pretty big player. That might be the knock on him. But he's actually done fine in zone blocking. He's been a very available player. Someone who has not had a whole lot of injury concerns throughout his career. I mean, you look at all these seasons. The least snaps he's played in a year was 799. And it is just a consistently good career. You can't find 1 year in here where he grades out negatively in anything. And you watch the film, and this guy, he is a top guard in the NFL. So, yes, he is 35 years old, right? He is going to be, well, I guess he just turned 35 yesterday. We're looking at this, so happy late birthday to Kevin Zeitler. He's not a player you're going to have around for a long time. But to bring him in for 1 year, if he is anywhere close to this value, even if he went up to $10 million, I'm comfortable with that because he's proven to me that he's going to be good until he's not. And I don't know when he's not going to be good, and I'd like to bet that he's going to continue to be good until I'm wrong. And you look at this last year, I mean, this was like, what, almost his best season of his career, and he's 35 now, right? So I think you can bring him in, have him play right guard for you. You know you're getting someone who's been available, someone who's going to be reliable, someone who's going to be not only a good pass protector, but a good run blocker. You bring that into Jacksonville, and you solidify a big position of need with a veteran who's going to help your offensive line out tremendously. So Kevin Zeitler, to me, not worried about the speed, not worried about any of that. You're not going to have him pull a ton or that sort of stuff, but if you want to lock down right guard, Zeitler is such an obvious option in this free agency class, and I would like to be the team who gets in on him at the position. But like I said, there's a lot of options. James Daniels had an incredible start to his year, got hurt though, and the question is, he doesn't really back this up with his play as much before. He took a big step forward this year. Is that who he is consistently, or is this just a hot start to his season? Because 92.9, that's a big difference, right, from what he's done before. Mekhi Becton could also be someone you bring in who had a better year at guard. I just personally feel he's going to go back to Philadelphia. Might be wrong on that. And then you got some players who are retired here who, for some reason, are listed. But that's kind of it as far as the legitimate options at the position. I wouldn't be in on too many other players. Even with Will Fries, he did not play a lot of this last year, so I'm not sure why he's projected that high. Maybe a team pays him that, but not really something I'm a big fan of. Now, the center position, this is hard for Jacksonville. What you do exactly. You might have to just bring in an older veteran again. I would say you probably have to, because Luke Fortner, I'm not trusting. Even if you get a rookie center or someone who can play it, like say you got a Gray Zabel in the draft, I mean, who knows if they're just ready to go right off the bat. I don't love a lot of these options at center. I think Austin Corbett got extended. Josh Myers, not a big fan. Coleman Shelton, not a big fan. Brian Kelly, maybe he's someone you bring in for 1 year, but it's a lot of money. And then Drew Dalman, yeah, he played very well the last couple of years. He's the big name on the market. He's also going to get paid like a ridiculous amount of money. And do you want to be the team that does that? I don't know. Especially considering how that went last year with Lloyd Cushenberry, who, did not really back it up this year. I'm not a big fan of that at the center position. So this might be one where I don't know what options you have. You might have to go make a trade for someone, get creative with it. But I don't like your options in free agency. So even with the need there, it's not a position I would address in free agency just because I don't think you're going to have a good opportunity to do it. Now on the defense, the interior defenders, look, you've got players there. What you really need at this point is probably a nose tackle. I would move on from Devon Hamilton's contract. That's another one I would do. It's a question of if he's worth like $6 to $7 million. I know his contract was $11.5 million a year, but the way Trent Baalke set it up is honestly, it's egregious. I mean, we've looked at this before. I think I'm not sure everyone's seen this though, so I'll just show it off again so you guys kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about here. When he signed the extension, yeah, $11.5 million. He's played 1 year under that. The amount he has earned already from this extension, $21 million. You have no option. I mean, you have the option to move on from him, but it's not considering him as worth this. You basically have to look at it look, he got paid $21 million for 1 year. He's got about $13 million left on his contract. So is he worth that $6.5 million or so a year going forward? I don't know. I think he's fine, but I'm not sure I would do that. So, you look at cash paid down here. It shows up a little bit bigger. I'm not sure why exactly. But 2025 and 2026, 7.3, 8.4. So is he worth this? That's the big question. And I think not. I think it's somewhat close, but I personally wouldn't do it. The direction I would go is probably after Poona Ford. And there's a name I skipped that I'll talk about as well. But I think this would be a solid option in nose tackle. It's an affordable contract. You're not going to have to pay him a lot. He had a great year for the Chargers as well. You see that here. He's someone who could help out a lot against the run, give you some juice against the pass. Just a very good veteran option. And look, if you miss on it, it's $3.5 million, something like that. It's not a big deal if you don't hit on that contract. Now, the name I would absolutely do everything I could to bring in is Calais Campbell. The concern of whether you would or not, well, there's two things. One is he could retire. I don't think he has yet. Haven't heard anything about that. And It'll be a very sad day when he does. It's going to come eventually. But the other thing is that he wants to win a Super Bowl. And you might be able to make an argument the Jaguars are going to be better, but can you make that argument to him? If a team comes in like, gosh, the Kansas City Chiefs or the Baltimore Ravens or the Los Angeles Rams or whoever it might be, I'm just throwing out random names. If they come in and try to sign him, he probably goes there. But I would offer a contract worth probably quite a bit more than this, five or $6 million. And I'd say, look, man, we want you to retire a Jaguar. You were a great player when you were here. You never should have left. And I'll tell you this, if we do not compete this year, if we're not in playoff contention, if we get eliminated, we will honor your wishes, we'll release you, we'll let you go to a playoff contender, and you'll still be in the playoffs. So please believe in us. We're going to be a much better team. We've fixed a lot of problems. We believe we can be in contention, especially with you on this defensive line, and we want you to finish out your career. That is personally the approach I would take. Maybe there's a bit of the fan talking there, but it is very, very undeniable that Calais Campbell has outperformed his contracts consistently late in his career, and he has outperformed them like crazy. He has been a phenomenal player late in his career. We'll take a look at some of his stats here that he's pulled off. This is great stuff that he's done. Okay, 39 pressures still last year, 5 sacks. Gets paid about $3 million by the Miami Dolphins. 85.9 run defense grade. Look at all these grades. These are ridiculous. Now you see he had his best years with Jacksonville. Incredible player here. Tackling, I guess, has taken a hit. Not a big deal. Don't really care that much. It's somewhat important, but for what he's doing outside of that, not a big problem. But you're consistently getting like 30 to 40 pressures. You're getting, in these last years, at least 5 sacks. You're getting a guy who is an absolute presence on the interior, still playing a good amount of snaps, still 600 snaps, 700 snaps, somewhere around there. You pay him $3 million. I'm doing everything I can to get that player, even if he's 38.5, because he hasn't fallen off. You have no proof of that. The guy is the same guy. He might be a little slower at this point, but still, it's an incredible football player. And I'd want to bring him back to Jacksonville and do everything I could to make him finish his career out here. Now, edge defenders. Jacksonville needs depth here, right? Right now, you have Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, and that's it. You have no other pieces aside from that you believe in at that position. I would look at some trade options for the team. I wouldn't want to make a huge deal. I know one name personally that intrigued me. I don't think he's on the trade market, but I think you could offer something to him. I'd be willing to offer something big. Would be B.J. Ojulari. Coming off the ACL, I know that's a problem, but he's a player I personally liked. Maybe you could go get him for a 3rd-round pick. You get a guy who's a very advanced pass rusher. Could be a steal. But as far as free agency, which is what we're talking about here, I wouldn't be signing big contracts, but Baron Browning is a name that kind of stands out to me. I think he'd be perfect for a rotational guy in this scheme. You look at his career, he's been a solid player for the Denver Broncos. Of course, he really took a step forward in 2023. 2024, ends up getting traded. You have a very big difference, though, in performance from Denver to Arizona. You see he obviously struggled a lot more in run defense. He was a better pass rusher, technically. But this is someone who still, I think, has a good amount of upside. Can be a very good rotational piece. Get you a good amount of pressures. Get in that, 30 to 40 range. Like you see, get a good amount of sacks. And it would be worth like $6 million for this team. And you got to get someone in, right? You cannot sit here and just pretend that the edge position's fine because we have 2 starters. These players take snaps off. They get rotated in and out somewhat. Doesn't mean they're backups. Doesn't mean they're rotational players. So that's just a part of the position. They are not on the field for every single snap. You have to get someone in there to help them out, which is why we've been talking about even a big name like Abdul Carter in the draft. I would still be okay with that because you can find a way to get him on the field with them and still have them as pretty much full-time players. But if you want the free agency option, Baron Browning, I think would be an easy name to bring in. Hard to really miss on that, especially given half a year to prepare to get ready to play in the system. I think it's part of the reason why you see that he kind of struggled in some ways when he went to Arizona, right? Changing the scenery in the middle of the year, it's not an easy ask for these players. Now, I think this is my last guy I'm going to advocate for adding here. Actually, we've got one more after this, but we'll go to linebackers. Everyone's freaking out. They're like, what? Talking about adding a linebacker to this team? Why would we do that? Well, there's one that makes a lot of sense to me. That's Dre Greenlaw. Now, I don't know where the contract ends up. I know they say 1 year, $6 million. This is probably going to be a guy you bring in for a year, like they say. But there's probably going to be a lot of incentives involved in a contract. He is still a player who's got some time left, right? 27 years old, going to turn 28 probably right before the season. But he's had a phenomenal career with the 49ers. And what you love about Dre Greenlaw, and considering what you need on this team, he is phenomenal in coverage. He has some incredible grades here. Starting in 2022, you're grading out around 80 every year. This last year, of course, 34 snaps. He did not play a ton of football for the 49ers. He was hurt early in the season, came back week 15. It was from that, I think it was an Achilles injury in the Super Bowl, just freakish injury. Felt awful for him. And then he gets hurt. I think it was a calf after that. That's the concern here, right? He's a player who's had some injury issues recently. But he's also someone who, when he came back, played at a really high level. Made an impact on that team. You go back to 2023, you go watch the NFC Championship game, and some of the impact he had. This guy's a leader, right? This is a guy who's going to help set your culture. Someone who's going to give you a big need in terms of getting a coverage guy. He's going to let Devin Lloyd maybe be more of that pass rusher he was in college, and really fill out that room well. Because I know Ventrell Miller gets people a little excited, but he is not someone that I would necessarily be planning around for the future. I think he's a nice piece in that room. So Dre Greenlaw, he's someone I would definitely be targeting on a 1-year deal. I think he'd be a nice fit here. The last guy, you know this guy. It's a safety. I could throw out Javon Holland. I could throw out big names. But honestly, I would give Andre Cisco 1 more year here. I would be willing to give him a 1-year contract, throw some incentives on it, and say, look, last year wasn't what we wanted. We had issues, but it was a really crappy situation too. You're on a terrible defense as far as scheme specifically, and the leadership there was awful. And there's reasons for that, I think, off the field. Some that are fair, some that aren't. But Andre Cisco, I'd be fine giving him a 1-year deal, giving him a shot, because this was a player we felt very good about not that long ago. And you can very easily make excuses for why last year went the way it did. So I'd be okay. Bring him in on a cheap deal, 1 year, solidify that position. And then I would probably want to go into the draft and bring in a strong safety type of player. I think Kevin Winston Jr. is an awesome candidate for that. I've thrown his name out a ton in mock drafts. It's very rare I don't draft him in a mock draft. I'm sorry for your sake that you got to see the same pick every time, but it's a good pick. So I would like that. If they don't, totally fine with it. I don't expect it. I would actually say right now I'd be shocked if Andre Cisco comes back. But you do got Andrew Wingard, and you could use him as your free safety on this team. So those are the guys I would target. I know you could also throw out a corner. I actually probably should do that, although I don't have them listed over here. I think you'll have some opportunities for corner in the draft, but if you were to go after someone, let's go back up to the top of this list. I think Charvarius Ward could be a really good option. Obviously, he struggled last year, but he had so many off the field things that hurt him. Not his fault either, just terrible stuff happening in his personal life. I think he lost a kid of his. Just someone who he said himself, like, part of the reason why he's not going back to San Francisco, it's nothing to do with the team, but he just wants to get away from where all that stuff happened. And so this is still a great football player. You could get him cheap for a year. I don't think he signs a long-term contract. I could be wrong. If you get him on a prove-it deal for a year, I think you're sitting really well, and you've got a good shot of having a very good secondary. So going over here, I don't have him listed. I should. But that would make up the rest of probably your spending and what you have available. But you can throw him on here, just pretend he's on the list. These are the players I would sign. You have Cooper Kupp, I would trade for. I'm still going to include him in this, but Andre Sisco was one, Drake Greenlaw, Kevin Zeitler, Baron Browning, Puna Ford, Calais Campbell, Cornelius Lucas, and then, like I said, Charvarius Ward would probably make this list too. Just kind of lapsed my mind when I was putting this together. And if it's close on cap, the player I would probably consider not adding to the team would be Andre Sisco. I think he'd be the one I would cut out of all these options. Because, like I said, I think Andrew could start back there and play fine. It sounds like they're pretty high on him, so I have no problem with that, and I know he probably won't be back. Andre, that is. Now, where things stand, I think you have a pretty good roster if you make these moves. I know I'd like to move on from Gabe Davis. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen as much as I wish we could just, offload the contract. But that would be one I'd like to do. Your backfield you definitely want to add to in the draft. I think you want to get a backup quarterback at some point. Want to add in another receiver here. Be some good options for that in this draft still. Tight end, another position you're going to address in the draft. But these are ones that makes a lot of sense to do it there. The offensive line, I think you have the tackle position worked out really well. The interior, you're going to need a center. That's a big question here, and not a lot of great options available there. Maybe this is where you get a Gray Zabel. Maybe you move up in the draft order to go do that. That's a player I would look at. The defense, I think you're in a really good situation. I think this is easily the strongest area of the team, especially if you got Charvarius Ward in here as well. Because you're looking at a defensive line that has Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker. You got Baron Browning rotating. Calais Campbell, if it's a 4-3, could kick outside a little bit. You have him on the interior with Eric Armstead, Puna Ford, Mason Smith as well, who fixed that. Forgot to put his name there. So you've got a very stacked defensive line. You have a linebacker room with 3 outstanding players, all playing in their best roles. You're able to do anything you want there. Cornerback, if you've got Charvarius Ward here, that's a complete secondary. And in the safety position, you can go get someone. I think that's really easy to do in this draft. And once again, Kevin Winston Jr., he'd be that guy for me that I'd be targeting. But this leaves you in I think, a really good position. You look at the cap. You'd still have some money available. Be spending about what you need to. Maybe not saving as much. Right? That could be the little knock here. But, if you want to, you could make some moves. You could try to move off a contract. Like I mentioned, Gabe Davis we want to look at. Travis Etienne I'd even look at for this team. It sounds like they could be shopping him. Not going to report that, though, necessarily until we see a little bit more. But there's a rumor about that right now. But ultimately, I think this leaves you in a very strong position. You got a lot of draft capital. You have a good roster. You got a lot of holes filled. And the ones you don't, you have a pretty easy plan to address them. So that is where I'd sit on this. That's what I would do. You're not going to get everyone in this list, right? Some guys you're going to get outbid for. But I think if you got a lot of these players, you're sitting well with the cap. You got a talented roster. And you got the NFL draft coming up where you're going to have some opportunities to make some big splashes. So those are my thoughts. We're going to wrap it up there, though. And tomorrow, it's going to be a big day for us. We're going to have a lot of coverage on free agency. I'm going to make sure I'm home in time for it. So I'll be getting off work a little bit early if I'm there. and we'll just be covering it all day. So get ready for a lot of content out from this channel. It's going to be a busy day. But with that said, want to shout out our channel members. Just wait till the last one here. Premier Nasir 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubberducky 500, Brian Foster, and Ichi Wiener. I told him I'd say it one time, so there's the one time. But I appreciate all your support on this channel. Thanks to the new members who just joined. Appreciate you guys all watching, giving your comments. A lot of fun talking to y'all. Definitely let me know your thoughts, who you would bring in, what you want to see tomorrow. Are you against spending? Are you for spending? Honestly, for me, I'm almost always against the big spending in free agency. That's why you saw pretty much only one-year deals here. I'm not someone who wants to bring in a guy for over $100 million in free agency for multiple years. It's very rare you're going to see me advocate for that. So, with that said, thanks for watching. Make sure to tune in tomorrow. Maybe we'll have a live stream later that night, depending on how things go, depending on what happens. Might be necessary, but hope y'all enjoy your day. Join the channel tomorrow. Let me know your thoughts. And finally, go Jags.